This is Aaron Tomlinson, and he is
Derrick Day. We are Aaron and Derrick.
Aaron and Derrick, the Aaron and Derrick Show. There you go. Or
There we
Derrick.
go.
We'll go alphabetical order. How's that sound?
That works for me, man.
So anyway, just to introduce tonight's show before we talk about what we're drinking and that kind of stuff, we're going to talk about deconstructing from deconstruction.
Woohoo!
And, so it should be a good time. We want to affirm the deconstruction process, but say there's more to life than that. So Derrick, what you drinking tonight?
Well, I couldn't decide on what to drink. I have this Merlot. This is how much Merlot I had left. You know, I've been drinking Merlot all this week. But then I said I want a little kick, so I got some Bullet Bourbon over here. So I've got a two-fisted drinking scenario here.
All right. Well, I am myself, because I may or may not have an obligation after this.
Me too, by the way.
Okay. So I'm going light.
Chilada.
So yeah.
I love those things.
I do too, man. I do too. You turned me on to Clamato, and I'm just like, man, is there anything better in the world?
Yeah, it's like Clamato is some special stuff.
Really good stuff. So back to deconstructing from deconstruction. I've been making some posts on Facebook. We've talked about it. Derrick, you really, a while back, went after it. I don't mean went after it like you were attacking some, but you were just pointing out that, you can just keep on the hamster wheel of deconstruction all the time.
Yep.
And one of the things that I think happens, this is what I think. If all we do is deconstruction, if that's all we talk about, if that's all we create content around, if that becomes our, I'm going to steal a phrase from you. Sorry, it's just floating around in my conscious. But if that becomes our cottage industry,
yeah, there you go.
Then I think that's a problem. And here's the problem. There's lots of problems too, and we'll get into it. But this is what I see as the main thing. Religion is still controlling your life. It's still controlling the dialogue.
Yeah. It's
still the focus.
Correct.
So just a little bit of interesting neuroscience here and psychology. When you're visualizing something, when you're looking out, when you're seeing things out here, there's always a foreground and a background. And in order to shift foreground, background, you have to move your eyes and shift your focus. So right now, when I'm looking at the screen, you're in my foreground. Everything in the room over here is peripheral. I'm not focused on, I'm not looking at it. And then if I shift my eyes over here, now my microwave over there has become the focal point, and everything else has become peripheral. Mm-hmm. And this is what I see as the problem when we're always against something. Whatever it is that we're against still has center stage.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, if you're really zealous for converts, if you're really evangelical like we were, right? Very religious, then Jesus, Christianity, whatever the religion is, it's the focal point, right? And everything else becomes peripheral. And certainly a lot of people have testified to that. They deconstruct and find out it's okay to go enjoy life. Find out, thinking of an individual, I wasn't called to do ministry. I always wanted to do these other things. And all those other things became peripheral because I was so busy doing ministry. Maybe family time was sacrificed because we were always in church, or whatever the case may be. It's the focus, right? But when we make deconstruction the main thing, religion is still the focus. It's still in control. It's still the centerpiece. All we've done is change the message. Instead of, yay, this is wonderful, join this, we've gone to, oh, this is horrible and this sucks, let's get away from it. Mm-hmm. And it's okay to shift your focus, right? So I'm not like saying people shouldn't consume content related to deconstruction, or that they shouldn't, or that you or I shouldn't post or make videos or have discussions like this tonight about deconstruction, about the problems with religion and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. That's shifting the focus, right? But if all we do is deconstruct and deconstruct and deconstruct and deconstruct, then religion is still in charge. Religion is still in control.
Dude, that's powerful.
And I think that's the problem. I think it's just as toxic.
Yeah.
So that's how I'll set it up.
And so, we've talked about this a lot. I mean, I would say that over the course of the last 5 or 6 years that we've been, talking on a regular basis, I would say that this topic consumes probably about 5% of our conversations.
Yeah, that's probably fair.
I'd say that it's somewhere in that neighborhood.
Sure.
And my problem is not with people who deconstruct. As a matter of fact, I think that no matter what your beliefs are, or even if you want to separate it from beliefs, if you want to split the hair and say, okay, even what I think I have confidence in, you have to deconstruct this and find out whether or not this thing that you believe in, have confidence in, have faith in, that it makes sense, that it works for you. Because there's nothing worse than sending good money after bad, right? Or good thought against bad. Basically, like if you're investing in something and you see this losing money, then it's incumbent upon you to change your investment strategy,
Yeah.
and the punt on what you're doing, so that you don't wind up losing everything. And I think that what happens is that people wind up sacrificing their spiritual identity on the altar of deconstruction.
Yes.
Right. So with that being said, this is the time for a shameless plug for my book, Deconstructing Religion 2. And you can get this on Amazon. And I promise you, if you get this, I promise you, this will be the last deconstruction book that you will have to buy. Because I break down things from a Christian perspective, but basically it's applicable to any religion, any belief system, whether it be secular or sacred,
Yeah.
right? And it applies to all of that. But you need to deconstruct and reach an endpoint. And at the end point, there's a fork in the road. And it's not like the Yogi Berra fork, like when you find a fork in the road, you take it. No, you have to decide which way you're going to turn. Either I'm going to return to my religion, but without all the superfluity,
Right.
without all the bullshit.
Right.
And I have a cleaner, more streamlined, more robust faith that I can rely on. And that it's my faith. I'm not compelled to press it on anyone else.
Exactly.
Right. Again, my case study on this, Jeff Turner, if you're listening, brother, you are the motherfucking man when it comes to deconstruction.
Yeah.
Or deconstruction and returning to faith.
Yeah.
Right. Because he went back to it in a very honest way.
Yeah.
Now, the other one is like, I depart from the faith and I give heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils.
Right.
I'm kidding. Actually, no, I'm not. But you veer off and you go into something else. Like if you're a Christian, you go to be a Muslim, or you become a Buddhist, or you become spiritual without any religious guardrails, right? No books, no saviors, no mystics, no prophets, or anything like that. So what you were talking about is the cottage industry of deconstruction, and I'm reading from my book. And this is like in the final chapter of the book. And it's the title of this section is called Beware the Cottage Industry of Deconstruction. Don't get stuck in the purgatory of doubt. Now I'm going to read this whole thing. It's like 5 paragraphs, but bear with me. I'm going to read fast and hopefully I won't bore anybody. It says, now here's where shit gets tricky. The cottage industry of deconstruction. We've discussed earlier how deconstructing religion has become its own little economy. There are podcasts, books, Instagram influencers, YouTube channels, and even merch dedicated to deconstruction. And while some of these resources can be genuinely helpful when you're in the thick of it, there is a danger of getting stuck in the endless loop of consuming deconstruction content without ever moving forward. Paragraph 1. Paragraph 2. You don't want to be the person who's 5 years into their deconstruction journey and still hasn't made a decision about what they actually believe. And trust me, there are plenty of people out here who will gladly sell you endless content to keep you in that state of doubt because it's profitable to them. It's like a black hole. Once you're in, it's hard to escape. Paragraph 3. I said 5. It's actually 4. Paragraph 3. But here's the truth. Deconstruction is not, I repeat, is not a lifestyle. It is not a permanent identity. It's a temporary process meant to help you get to a place of clarity, whether that's through rebuilding your faith or walking away from it altogether. Don't let the cottage industry of deconstruction keep you stuck in the purgatory of doubt where all you do is tear things down without ever building something new. Final paragraph. At some point, you have to stop consuming and start doing. Start making decisions. Start figuring out what your next step is. Because if you don't, you'll just end up as another lost soul, spinning your wheels in an endless cycle of what ifs, and maybe I'll figure it out someday. And that, my friends, is what I call the hamster wheel of deconstruction. Now I'm saying that again because I said this to a friend, and he got really upset with me, and I did not mean to upset him. You know who you are because you watch sometimes. This was not intended to hurt you or anyone else. Right. But the reality is that there are people who write books. I mean, entire series of books that are all dedicated to deconstruction. I've written 2 books. Deconstructing Religion 1, which was written from my perspective as a Christian pastor and bishop, what I was at the time. Deconstructing Religion 2 was written from the standpoint of me coming out of atheism, because not only did I deconstruct my Christianity, but at some point, boys and girls, brothers and sisters, I had to deconstruct the fucking atheism too. And what I found was, just like how I left Christianity and wound up in atheism, I left atheism and wound up in this. I would say that it's sort of like the grand expanse of the universe of spirituality. In other words, I'm not yoked to anything. I'm not bound by anything. I'm free to move around. You know, it's like the Southwest commercials. You're free to move about the country. Well, you're free to move about your spirituality. You're free to move about your intellect. You're free. Once you have deconstructed, you're free. Either way you go, even if you go back into faith, which, you know, that's not my testimony, but for those who do, if they go back with freedom. They don't go back with bondage. So that is my take on it. I'm just like, at some point, you have to stop deconstructing. It's like if you start peeling an apple and you keep slicing and slicing and slicing, eventually you get to the core of the apple. And at that point, there's nothing else to slice. And you stop. Now, what do you do with that at that point? Do you eat the apple shards that you cut? Do you take the seeds and plant them somewhere? Do you take the core and use it to compost and make fertilizer? You do something with the end. At the end of the activity, there is the end, and you have to do something. So that's all I'm saying. That's my contribution to this, Aaron, is that at the end of it, once you've deconstructed, go do something with it. But don't deconstruction ad nauseum is not a good look. I mean, doing anything ad nauseum is not a good look. At some point, you have to change it up. You got to change gears. So,
yeah, good stuff. So somebody, Don Jackson, put in the comments, free. And I really, if we were back in church, I'd say, wow, that phrase you said really spoke to my spirit. And how did you say it? I deconstructed, went into atheism, deconstructed from atheism.
I deconstructed from Christianity, and then I deconstructed my atheism.
And then you hitched your wagon to, I can't remember how you said it, but expansive.
The expanse of the universe, the spiritual universe. I'm not bound to anything.
Love that. The expanse of the spiritual universe. I love that. Love that. Love that. Love that. Love that. Love that. So I can say a hearty amen to that. I didn't go as, I flirted with atheism.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I appreciate that you did, because if you're going to deconstruct, and I said this in the book, and I've said it to you, and I've said this on the show many times, if you don't at least flirt with atheism, if you don't at least consider it, if you don't at least juxtapose your beliefs with that and compare and contrast, you haven't really deconstructed. You haven't. Sorry.
Yeah, no, we went on a few dates, but we never had intercourse.
Never. She never gave it up, huh?
Never gave it up. Never had a baby. So, But here's what I love about that. I love this idea, because if you're going to deconstruct from something, whatever it is, and I love that you pointed out, we should constantly be looking, and well, not constantly. I got to watch my language, because somebody's going to take that and say I'm contradicting myself. But we should, on a regular basis, be examining our beliefs and seeing if they work for us or if they constrict us, right? Do they empower us? Do they liberate us? Do they expand our universe, or do they limit us? Does it expand our choices, or does it limit our choices?
Yeah.
And when you're stuck, depending on the version, how far a person went into dogma and fundamentalism and all that stuff, it's a very small corner of the world.
Yeah.
It was something that always got me with other pastors and leaders. I hung around some people that were really, they wouldn't let their kids read
Harry Potter.
Wasn't Christian. Can't listen to any music that's not Christian. Can't go to any event that isn't a Christian event.
Yeah.
And I used to look at that and think, you're living, and I used to call it this, well, even, going back 15, 20 years. And of course it was offensive when I would say it, but I used to call it an intellectual ghetto,
Yeah.
that Christians are living in intellectual ghettos, but at the very least, it's a very small slice of the pie of life, right?
Yeah.
So those beliefs are very restricting, and they're very constricting, even to spirituality, especially to spirituality.
Preach, man.
Because there is a vast universe of spiritual things out there that someone can explore and try and see what works and see what doesn't. I know. So I'm coming up. I've been talking about this on Facebook. It's important to me. Tomorrow's my birthday. Last year at this time, I was incredibly ill, went into the hospital, horrible condition, and spent the last year really, not so much the last few months, but definitely the first, 7-8 months after that, physical health, getting back into physical shape, occupied almost the entirety of my focus, right?
Yeah.
And as having been someone who, when I was in Christianity, had a healing ministry, I have seen stuff work. Medical science can only take you so far. And I'm thankful for it, by the way. And I want to keep saying that. If I had not had access last year at this time, if I had not had access to what medicine provides for us, if I had not had access to medical care, I wouldn't be here today. What my condition required immediate, intensive medical attention, right? But there's limits to that. And so when I came out of the hospital, I'm like, I know there's limits to this. And recently, this will crack you up, but recently I've been chided for going back to Christianity. And nothing could be further from the truth. I didn't run home and pick up my Bible or pick up, Charles Capp's books, God's Medicine, or Kenneth Hagin's book, The Healing Power of Jesus' Name, or whatever, right? Just go back to that. You should put the link to your book out there too, by the way.
Okay.
I think you should put the Amazon link. But I understood some principles that were completely universal, that had nothing to do with religion. So I started reading Neville Goddard, who was part of the New Thought movement. I read Brian Scott's book on unlimited power, and Brian is anything but religious. I picked up books on shamanism. I went to the bookstore and probably bought 3 or 4 books on shamanism and shamanic ways of how do they approach healing. I read books on energy healing. I read books on well, I didn't read books, but I watched videos and stuff from reputable sources on exercise and cardio fitness and nutrition and what supplements to take and all of this various different stuff. My point is that I even looked at books on magic and witchcraft, and that there was just this vast array of opportunities. And then from there, reading philosophy and all kinds of different stuff. Like, you couldn't do that in the intellectual ghetto of religion, right? If I was still constricted by my beliefs with religion, then I wouldn't be able to open up to the expansive spiritual universe
Mm-hmm.
that is out there. And I know now, because hopefully I'm not going to make the same mistake twice, meaning I want to see what's valuable in every path that's out there that I get exposed to,
Yep.
but I don't want to hitch my wagon to one specific path. Now, if I find something that works really well for me and I'm just like, wow, this is really my path, that might be a different thing, but never to the degree that I can't think outside that box. And that's why I think deconstruction is necessary, because what was constructed for us was an intellectual, spiritual box that contained our life force, that contained our power, that prevented us from reaching our full potential. And so deconstruction is necessary in order to liberate those forces of life and spirit and power that are available to us and that are inside each and every one of us, that any healthy spiritual path is going to point you towards.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as you make a commitment to one, in my opinion, it becomes limiting. So I just had to build on that because I really loved what you said there, and I really loved how you said it.
So I want to share something else. This is another one of my favorite books here, The Tao of Jeet Kune Do by Bruce Lee. Whether you're a martial artist or not, I highly recommend that you read this. Why? Because what Bruce Lee did in this book, and he wrote this book while he was incapacitated. He was injured in ostensibly what was a street fight. We don't really know, but it was like during a time when the doctors told him that he wouldn't walk again. And so while he was bedridden, he wrote this book, and it's full of illustrations and stuff that he drew. This was his manifesto, right? And the premise behind Jeet Kune Do is Jeet Kune Do means the way of the intercepting fist, but it's like he also called it the way of no way, right? And the idea is that he said that the reason he had got into the position that he was in, where he was injured, is because he had got into a system, learned the system well, relied on the system, and then the system failed him, right? And so what he learned was that you, in the case of martial arts, you take what is useful and discard what isn't useful. So for some people, like for example, if you're like 5'7" and 200 pounds, you're not going to be a high kicking, striking machine. That's just not going to be your MO. You're likely to be a ground pounder. So it would behoove you to get really familiar with Greco-Roman wrestling or jiu-jitsu, so that you could fight at your center of gravity, right? Because that's the whole thing, is like finding your center of gravity. And it's the same thing with what you believe. Your spiritual center of gravity is your spiritual core. It's your vision statement, your internal vision statement. It's your why, right? And so anyway, I referred to this book because I remember when we first started doing phreology, and I was like, I said, I don't really want to talk about any biblical stuff anymore. And then we had a conversation. This is I'm letting people in on private conversations between Aaron and Derrick. You said, dude, listen, we were both in ministry for a long time. We were both well known and well respected in that circle. We know Scripture. We know the historicity of Scripture. We know the culture of Scripture. We know all of these things. So why should we give up all of our investment in that? That's what you said. And so that liberated us to incorporate some biblical thought or biblical teachings in some of the things that we discussed. The point is that, like how you were talking about, you had a robust healing ministry. So why should you discard everything that you have from that healing ministry, so that you can not talk about anything biblical? No, that doesn't make sense.
Right.
So the thing is we take what is useful and discard what isn't useful. And so for me, like, there are things like I have a really deep understanding of Christianity at a lot of different manifestations, but I also have a working knowledge of Islam, a working knowledge of Judaism, a pretty good working knowledge of Egyptian chematology, And then we were taught the Greco-Roman pantheon of gods, as part of our secondary education. So we know that I know these things, and what I'm able to do now is I'm able to take from each one of those things and say, okay, that teaching is applicable here. Like the Paul had wrote, test every spirit to see if it is from God, right? Okay, I'm going to test every spirit. I'm going to test every idea. I'm going to test every word spoken to me, and every word that I speak, I'm going to apply. And that testing is, the scientific method or some variation of that to see whether or not it works.
Yeah.
And if it works, then I say, okay, I'm going to put that in my toolbox and keep on moving. Right. And that's the whole thing about deconstruction, too. Like, if you think about deconstruction, it's like as you're dismantling things, you're learning things, and if you're smart about it, you're applying the tools that you use to break these things down and put them in your toolbox for later use.
Absolutely.
This is how carpentry and masons and metal workers, plumbers, how they apprentice people, right? How they mentor people. They get them out there and they teach them, and then once they understand how the tool works, you put it in the toolbox, and now you understand that. So that's the thing. What we want to do in this conversation is to help each and every one of you amass a set of tools, or understand how to amass the tools, how to utilize the tools, and how to put them in your toolbox to use at a future date.
It's good stuff. Good stuff. But I did a video this morning, because I'm not going to do one Sunday, because I'm going to be doing a 5K when I normally do Sunday morning lives. So yeah. I did a video today, and I talked about this very topic. And one of the things I talked about was for people who are very committed and devoted to their faith, deconstruction is not like giving up belief in Santa Claus. For some people, it is like giving up their belief in Santa Claus. And here's what I mean. I was talking to a friend, I had a conversation with a person who was an atheist and had been, I think, Baptist, and then came out of that as an atheist. And I wasn't there for the conversation, but the way it was retold to me, it was a very chill conversation, right? Because the person wasn't dogmatically atheist, and just said, yeah, I'm an atheist because, and this was their reasoning, because I never have had any kind of spiritual experience. God never made himself real to me. I don't have anything I can point to in my life to say that I've had any kind of spiritual experience. And then mentioned to my friend, I would love to have one, but it's never happened for me. Okay. So for this person, more than likely, the way it was described, I don't want to speak for them, but I'm just trying to make a point. Leaving was probably much easier, because it was like, this doesn't reflect who I am. This doesn't reflect my life's experience. This doesn't reflect what I know to be true. So I'm going to leave it. That's kind of like giving up belief in Santa Claus, if you see what I'm saying. Yeah. Because it was never central to their life to begin with, other than, they were raised in a Christian home and drugged to church and all that kind of stuff. Then there are those of us that, for whatever reason, whether we had some kind of spiritual experience or did not, but for whatever reason, it was very central to our identity. So, for example, who I am in Christ, I built my identity around that teaching. I was a pastor, my livelihood, my social structures, everything revolved around my identity as a believer and later on as a minister, right?
Yep.
So in that case, giving up church or Christianity or faith or whatever was not like, I don't believe in Santa Claus anymore. It was a complete deconstruction of my view of reality. I had to see reality differently anymore. No longer was I just on the right team fighting for the right cause, helping the world out, all of a sudden now all of that goes away. And I didn't really know who I was because I've shared this before many times, sort of a cutout version of myself, right? So for me, that's a deconstruction. It's a complete flip or reversal in the way that one views reality and in the way that one views one's self. And that experience is, by definition, by a clinical definition, that experience is traumatic.
Yeah.
It is trauma. So a person who experiences that has gone through a deep level of deconstruction and cannot stay there. You cannot stay there.
Correct.
And because you have to rebuild a sense of identity, a sense of purpose, a sense of your why. Why do you get up in the morning? And really sort of rebuild your life. It's really similar to someone that leaves an abusive intimate relationship, where they spent so much time fawning and placating to that other person so that they didn't get abused, that they completely lost themselves, and now they don't know who they are if they're not living codependently on that other person or living their life to please that other person. They have to be able to reconstruct a different way of being. They have to reconstruct their own self. And so for some people, they get hooked into the deconstruction cottage industry in the same way that a abused spouse will not leave an abusive situation.
Right.
It's a trauma bond, or I talked about this, it's common enemy intimacy. So what is common enemy intimacy? Well, that's when we gather around the water cooler at work when the boss is away and bitch about how much we all hate the boss, gossiping with one another, constantly getting together about what you're against. You know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. That's common enemy intimacy, right?
Yep.
And so a person who deconstructs and either their whole life, like in my case, or very significant portions of their lives goes with that, and they have to rebuild something, it's very easy to trauma bond with the deconstruction community. And it's very easy to camp out there in the same way that people continue to bitch about their boss, or continue to bitch about the person in their family that they don't like, or continue to tell the same story over and over and over again to their therapist. And then when that therapist challenges them to move on, they go find another therapist so that they can tell, because there's an addiction to it. There's an there literally is a dopamine hit off of those kinds of experiences. And so some people are getting their dopamine hits from religion, then they deconstruct. Now they've got to get their dopamine hits from something else. And the only way they know how to get those dopamine hits, there's nothing wrong with dopamine hits. I'm not shaming anybody for wanting a dopamine hit. It's necessary. It's essential. It's innate. It's intrinsic to who we are. It's just a question of how we choose to get those dopamine hits. So we can become addicted. We can become trauma bonded to deconstruction. We can become addicted to deconstruction. We can become intimate with other people in relationships through common enemy intimacy. And I see a lot of that going on, I think, with people who get stuck. So I'm saying this to expand upon and echo what you wrote so wisely in your book, that not to get stuck in the black hole of deconstruction, because if you get stuck in the black hole of deconstruction, it can be very difficult to come out of it.
Yeah. And that's, you bring up a really good point about the trauma aspect of it, because when you adhere to the trauma part of it, you're saying I'm making a conscientious decision not to heal.
Yes.
I'm making a conscientious decision not to get therapy, not to get better.
Right.
That, and I'll never forget this. Like my brother Brian told me this story, and I've used this in sermons ever since. A guy goes into the doctor, and he's got on this overcoat, and you can see something's protruding inside the overcoat. And so the doctor says, well, let's have a look at you and see what's wrong. And so the guy pulls off his overcoat and he has an arrow in his side.
Tell me we were talking about a flasher.
Yeah, so you know what I'm saying? It's not, see, that's why I love you, man.
I'm picturing my guy with an overcoat with something protruding.
We went from not having intercourse to a flasher. That's why you are my motherfucking dude, man.
Guess where my mind is tonight, I guess.
May the odds be ever in your favor, brother. So he walks in there and he's got an arrow stuck in his side, and the doctor looks at him. He says, "Dude, this is a slam dunk. This is easy. You know, I'm going to get you scheduled for surgery right away, and we're going to get this arrow out of you." And the guy says, "No, doc, hold on for just a minute. You see, when people see this arrow in my side, they have sympathy for me. They talk to me and they want to give me things and do things for me." He said, so doc, I don't want you to remove the arrow. I just want you to give me something for the pain.
Wow. That's so good.
Dude, Brian told me this story like 20 years ago, and I can't tell, man, listen, I preached that at revivals and it killed. Yeah. It killed.
For real.
But the point is that a lot of people, they have this pain, they have this trauma. They don't want to get rid of the trauma. What they want to do is they want to say, hey, look at me. Look at my pain. Look at my trouble. And then they want to find other people that are going through the same thing so they can say, hey, look at our pain. Look at our struggle. You know, hey, and instead of getting healing, you know, they're experiencing common enemy intimacy.
Right.
And so when the whole thing about deconstructing from deconstruction is that if you're deconstructing, you're going through a healing process.
Correct.
You know, I mean, it may not be trauma, right? But let's say it could be like parasitic.
Yeah.
Or it could be cancerous. Because when you talk about trauma, you're talking about impact.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
But it may not necessarily be impact. It could be any number of pathologies.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So when you decide to deconstruct, you're saying, okay, I'm going to address this pathology in me head on, and go through the steps to what I need to do to heal from this, or to figure out how can I live with this, right? But if you get in the deconstruction loop, and that's another term that I like to call the deconstruction loop or the deconstruction hamster wheel. You get on there and it's just like run. And I got to share something with you, right? Because you know, I only ran 3 days this week. Normally I run every day, but I only ran 3 days this week because of my work schedule. And the days that I didn't run, I felt like shit. I mean, my whole mentality, I was depressed, you know, but as soon as I got out there and ran, you know, the endorphins, you know, I get a dopamine hit. I feel like I'm accomplishing something. My mind gets clear, and all of a sudden I'm doing great. So there is something like if you're there's a difference between running a marathon, running a 5K as you're about to do, and running on a treadmill. A treadmill is a good substitute for being out in the world running, but it will never take the place of it.
Right.
Because at the end of the day on the treadmill, you're in a loop. You're right. It's never changing, right? But if you're out there running on the street, you can just change one side of the street or the other, or change it at different frequencies, different intervals, and it's still a different run. Yes. Right? So the idea is, okay, how do we get people again out of the constraint? Like, because deconstruction can be as constraining as any religion. Yes. Get out of the constraint, get out of the box, get out on the road and experience the fullness of it all. You know, experience the vastness of it. And so again, when we're deconstructing, we have to realize, number one, that at the end of the deconstruction is the end. Once you've torn down the house, once you've busted up the foundation, if you just keep digging, right? And here's a powerful metaphor. If you just keep digging, let's just say in a natural sense, you keep digging, you dig through the topsoil, you dig through the bedrock, you dig through the water tables, you dig, and eventually you get down to the core of the earth. Now, here's the funny thing about that is that going down to the core, you can't do that and survive.
Hmm.
Because the depth and the pressure will kill you. So if you keep deconstructing, you're like digging this hole deeper, and eventually you're going to get to a point where the pressure and the lack of breathable air and the depth will kill you. It will absolutely smother you spiritually, and you will die spiritually. And that's the problem with deconstruction, because if you don't stop, eventually you're not going to heal. You're not going to transpose or transform. You're just going to die.
Yeah.
You're going to die. And that's the whole thing, that like all we've been talking about, you and I over the last 5 years, is like getting people past, being in a sense of spiritual death, so that you can get up out of this, get out of the situation and begin to grow and flourish again.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah. And I think so maybe for this last little bit, maybe pivot the conversation to, okay, Derrick, I'm going to put the shovel down.
Yep.
But when I look up, I'm in this hole.
Like,
I'm addicted to digging. I'm ready to get off the treadmill and get out there and run. What are some practical steps that a person can take when they're moving on? What are some thoughts that you have on that?
If you find yourself in a deep hole, if you're really in a deep hole, then you have to engineer a way out. I mean, it's not just I'm going to grab onto the dirt and claw my way up. No, you're going to have to engineer a solution. Now your deconstruction is literally become an exercise of reconstruction, because you're in this hole. You got to get out.
Yeah.
But the best thing I heard, so I saw something on Facebook today. It was something somebody posted. They said that if you get on a train and you realize it's the wrong train, you get off at the first available stop. Because if you go any further, it's going to cost you greatly. And the person who wrote this was not talking about a train. That hit me. Hit me, punched me in the gut. So the thing is that, like, for example, if you're investing money and you realize that the investment potential isn't there, get out while you still have something. Get out while you still have your dignity or something tangible. Don't go until you're completely tapped out fiscally and physically, right? Same thing with relationships. It's like if I always tell people that the reason why people wind up in bad spots in relationships is because they don't read the signs. Listen, every person you meet they are like a highway with signposts. There are signs there, slippery when wet, do not enter, one way. There are signs, detour, exit here, danger, Will Robinson. There are signs.
Yeah.
Right? And if you wind up in a fucked up place in a relationship, it's the same thing as if you get on a freeway, you wind up at a detour that you can't get out of because you didn't read the signs. The signs were there. You saw them, but you chose to ignore them. So the thing is that when you're deconstructing, you're going to have to learn to recognize some signs, and then also, and this is really important, you've got to get into the concept and the habit of breadcrumbing. That as you go, you leave some breadcrumbs behind so that you're able to find your way back. Or if you're digging, you're digging in down the hole of deconstruction, you're going down a rabbit hole. Well, you might want to stop every couple of feet that you dig and build yourself a ladder. so that you could find your way out of this in the event that you get down here and you get stuck. Because if you make provisions along the way, then when you find yourself in a stuck place, you have a way out. You have a way out. And the problem with deconstruction is that when you talk about deconstruction for deconstruction's sake, you're saying dig the hole. No matter how long it takes, no matter what you have to sacrifice, just keep digging that fucking hole. And eventually you're at the bottom of the hole and you're where you said you are. And now you're in this place where you're going to have to engineer your way out. I mean, it's one thing where you don't really have to think about your exit strategy because you've already prepared it, right? But it's a whole nother thing when you get in there and you didn't make any provisions.
Yeah.
So now what has become, or what should have been an organic exercise is now a mechanical one.
Yeah.
And so that's my answer to your question.
So let me ask you this, so I've been getting pushback because I've been putting some posts, and I get pushback. The primary pushback that I get is it takes time for people. It's as though what they're saying is it's okay to keep deconstructing because other people need more time to deconstruct, or don't tell people. In other words, Derrick, don't tell people to stop deconstructing because deconstruction takes time, and sometimes it takes years. I had one person even say it can take it can take I can't even get it out. Decades. So and my response was, there are better ways to heal from this. Like, this isn't healing. This isn't and for me, I think you have to find the instead. What do you want instead? And I don't do this just with deconstruction, but somebody says, I don't want to have heart disease. Well, what do you want to have instead? I need to focus on health and well-being. If all I did was sit there and read about heart disease and how heart disease was killing me,
you're never going to get better.
And at the outcomes and look at the statistics. And in December, they told me the plan is to keep you on this medication the rest of your life. And then in May, they took me off of medication. Like, if I would have just kept digging into the scientific literature or whatever, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, no, what I wanted instead was health and longevity. So I put my focus on what are the things that I need to do to build for myself health and longevity. And if I can build for myself health and longevity, then this heart disease will take care of itself because it's incompatible
with the good things that you want.
With health and longevity. You can't have health and longevity and have a failing heart.
But here's the thing is that you didn't just read about it, you did something.
I did it, but focus, right? My focus wasn't on, in fact, the last thing I wanted to do was read about my condition. The very last thing I wanted to do. And I remember I had a talk with the cardiologist, my second or third visit. I said, well, I've been going down the Google rabbit hole. And it's saying, and he just looked at me, he laughed. He said, don't do that. Just don't do that. And of course I knew better anyway, but you still get that temptation. Like, oh, well, what about this? And, and so that's what I would say. But I'm curious, Derrick, what you've made comments about it over the years, like, off and on, not a major emphasis. And I know you've gotten some pushback from people.
Yeah.
What's the push? Because what I'm trying to understand is, like, it should be common sense to stop beating a dead horse. It should be common sense to not keep deconstructing. Just the very term itself. I mean, just deconstruction. What the hell does it mean? I mean, you're tearing something up. Like, it doesn't make sense to me that you just keep tearing up what you've already torn up.
Yeah.
And yet we get pushback on this. So I'm curious if you can recall what's some of the pushback that you've gotten and how have you responded to that?
Well, I've had people say, that deconstruction can take a lifetime, not just decades. I've literally heard that from people you and I both know.
Yeah, I know.
Now, let me say this. For those of you who don't know, I was married before, 2 marriages ago. and my wife died of cancer. And I learned a lot about myself in that process, but I learned a lot about human nature, humanity from that, because everybody had some suggestion
Mm.
for how I should do things. Some people would say, "Oh, well, you need to go out and start dating right away," and some people say, "Oh, well, you need to give yourself time to heal," or some people say, "Oh, well, like grieving could take a lifetime," and then there's some people saying, "No, you got to get it together, and you got to live," and so you know, it would be trite, cliche to say, "Well, okay, you just find something in the middle of all these extremes," except grief, like deconstruction, is not one size fits all.
Right.
Okay, so I'm going to share something really intimate, really personal. But it was like when my wife had died, and you go through the part of the funeral where the morticians close the casket and all of that, right? Well, my mother-in-law at some point, she and my sister-in-law, they said they wanted to open the casket one more time. They wanted to see her one more time, and that was a bridge too far for me. Now, hang on. It wasn't that I had anything against them. It was just that was traumatic to me. I couldn't take that because I'd already closed it.
Yeah.
I went up there and folded the blankets and tucked her in and closed the lid. And so I got up and I walked out of the church.
Yeah.
I got up and I walked out because I said, I can't do that. And so my dad came out and he said, "Hey, you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah." Well, I said, "No, Daddy, I'm not okay. That was more than I could take." And he said, "Yeah, I understand." And he said, "That would be a bit much for me too." He said, "But," he said, "I know you're hurting. I know you're grieving. I know this is difficult." He said, "But you got to go back in there."
Mm.
He said, you can't stay out here. Uh, whatever it is that's troubling you," he said, "you'll have to face it. It's going to be tough, but you'll pull out of it." He said, "You're a strong man." He said, and he said some other things that I'm not going to say because those are personal between me and my dad. But I went back in.
Mm.
I went back in and I went through the whole exercise again, and that was that. And the thing is that nobody could tell you how long to grieve. Nobody could tell you how long to deconstruct. However, I think that after Mickey passed, I think I took an additional week off work, and then I went back. And I was content because my boss and the owner of the company, they were all like, "Hey, take all the time you need. We're going to keep paying your checks or whatever." But I'm like, "Shit, we have things that need to get done. And I'm going to go in. I'm going to face these things. I'm going to do what I need to do. I'm going to get off my ass and make this happen." The point that I'm getting at is that I was given the opportunity to grieve indefinitely. I was given a birth to grieve indefinitely, but I made the choice. I made the conscious decision not to make grief my destination. It was a waypoint on my journey. It was something I was passing through, but I was passing through and I was going to get through. So just like that with deconstruction in a way is like dying. It's like a part of you is dying, and you could choose to sit up there and wallow in that. And there are people that are going to give you a wide enough berth where you can actually stay there. But Maya says this all the time. She says, "You can get in your feelings," she said, "but you can't live in them."
I like that.
And so I've learned to I've incorporated what she said into my daily vernacular. So the same thing with when you're in deconstruction, a lot of times you're going to be in your feelings. You're going to be upset because you were taught something wrong. You are going to be upset because somebody said something wrong to you, or somebody abused you, or somebody hurt you. You're going to be upset, but your emotions are valid. Your feelings are valid. They're absolutely valid, but you can't stay there. You can't build your life around that. If you're going to deconstruct and make deconstruction your lifestyle, then what you're saying is that you're going to immerse yourself in the grief. You're going to immerse yourself in the trauma. You're going to immerse yourself in the parasitic, whatever it is that is causing you harm. You're going to immerse yourself in it and remain there instead of making it a waypoint on the journey of your life.
Mm.
And that, again, like I said, will ultimately spiritually kill you.
Yeah. I don't know, brother. That's a pretty good place to land the plane, I think.
Yeah, that's
that was worth rewinding and listening to again, for sure.
Man, I just hope it helps somebody, because at the end of the day, listen, I don't care what, like we have friends, you and I, that run the whole spectrum from hardcore Calvinist Christians all the way to to militant atheists, and here's the thing, like everybody's going, they're now. Let me just say this. Let me say one quick thing: is that if you never deconstruct what you believe or what you hold sacred, what you hold to be true, if you never deconstruct it, you'll never understand why it is you believe what you believe or why you think what you think.
Right.
At some point, that's just like, I say this all the time, the vast majority of people buy cars, drive cars, and they never know about the 1,000 processes that happen between the time you turn the key and the first cylinder fires.
Right.
I mean, literally, it's like 1,000 processes or 1,000 steps in the process that from getting from here to there. And if you never understand those processes, then you'll never understand. Like if your car doesn't start, then you'll say, "Oh, I just need to take it to the shop," and I don't understand why. But if you understand the process, that you say, "Okay, if I do this and do this and do this, then maybe I can brute force the car to start," right? Because now I understand something. And so the problem is with deconstruction, or with people that don't deconstruct, is that they never understand how the process works. And when it doesn't work, then you're blindsided and you're heartbroken and you're hurt, and then that's when the trauma happens.
Yeah.
Because I never bothered to learn. But if you take the time to learn, then it's easy to go back and reverse engineer things and figure out, okay, it doesn't work this time. Now I know what to do the next time. Problem solved.
Yeah.
So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
It's a good story. It's good stuff. So, yeah, I think that's a great place to land the plane. I'd be curious to hear other people's stories out there. If you want to share with us in the comments, we would love to hear that. And Derrick, I opened it up. I think I'll let you lead us out. How's that sound?
Yeah, again, folks, I want to say this, that if you're deconstructing, I honor, and I can speak for Aaron and say we honor your deconstruction. And it is part of the journey of life. It is part of understanding your spirituality. It is part of self-understanding, of introspection. But it is not the be-all to end-all. It's not the stopping point. It's not, as our friend Kyle Butler would say, it's not the place where you want to pitch your tent and build a fire, right? You want to keep it moving. So what I would encourage you to do is, as you're deconstructing, make sure that you're mindful of leaving breadcrumbs behind you so that you can find your way back. Make sure that you don't wind up trauma bonding with people. Like there are some people that say, "Oh, well, we're deconstructing together, and we could go through this together." But it's like some people will get on the hamster wheel, and they would love nothing more than to have you running beside them, and that's not where you want to be. So, learn how to breadcrumb, learn how to identify the hamster wheel, and understand that if you start going down the rabbit hole, keep building a way out.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to be at the bottom of the hole and say, "Damn, now I really got to figure this out." By the time you're there, it may be too late. It may be too late. You may not be able to engineer your way out of it. So, work on your exit strategy as you go along. And I hope that helps. I hope that that helps everybody that's deconstructing. And also, if you are curious about deconstruction and you want to learn more and you want to get the last book you'll ever need on deconstruction, get Deconstructing Religion 2 by yours truly.
Awesome. Thank you, Derrick. I appreciate it as always, man.
Likewise, man. This has been a good one.
Absolutely.
Yep.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. And we'll be back I probably next Friday, hopefully.
Yeah. I don't have anything pressing. I know you got athletic kids, so Friday nights are.
I do. So we'll see what the fall holds for us. But anyway, love you guys, and peace and hair grease, and we're out.
Love you guys.